Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 53 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined by Rick Ballou, host of Into the Night on 1010XL 92.5 FM from 6 to 8 p.m. each weekday. Rick and I are going to go over some head coach traits, just traits we'd like to see in a general head coach candidate. I think it's would be a good exercise to just go over that in a more general overview, as opposed to attaching names, because as much research as we might do, it's pretty hard for us to really know how good a candidate is or how well they'll work out, especially because a lot of it is due to luck. So we're going to go over each of our top 5 coaching traits that we're looking for in future head coaches. Rick, welcome back. Appreciate you joining the show again. How you doing?
Gus, how are you? What's going on with this weather, man? I mean, we're going to have to pack up and move to Florida.
Absolutely. I guess we can't complain too much. It is sunny. It is over 50 degrees
nice
outside, but for Florida, it's very dreary. And so I'm with you. I'm definitely looking forward to summer, but here we are in winter. Here we are in the head coach coaching cycle for 2025. Before we get to our conversation, though, we're going to start with trivia, as we always do. Doug Peterson finished with a 22-29 record as Jaguars head coach, 43.1% winning percentage. Which coach has the worst winning percentage in franchise history? Is it Urban Meyer, Gus Bradley, Doug Marrone, or Mike Mularkey? You got a guess for this one, Rick?
Boy, I want to say Mike and Urban both won 2 games, but I honestly think what Gus did collectively over the years may be worse. So, you got 1 year to base it on with Mularkey, which for my opinion, that was the worst roster in 30 years this franchise ever had. I'll go with Gus Bradley.
Yeah, the correct answer is Mike Mularkey. As you said, he was just the coach for 1 year. It was the first year that Shad Khan was owner of the Jaguars in 2012, and he just won 2-14. So short and not so sweet for Mularkey there. But we're moving on, hopefully, to greener pastures. Rick, why don't you start us off with the number 1 coaching trait you look for?
Well, you got to be a great leader of men. And boy, I mean, being a head coach nowadays is so hard because it's changed. I look at Mike Vrabel, hired yesterday by New England. I wonder if he's a dinosaur here. The whole world of being a disciplinarian, that's gone. There's more and more player rights, and you got to treat today's players with equal respect. And how do you separate teaching from coach to player? It used to be so basic. The coach was the leader. He was the boss, and that the players, run wind sprints, do this, do that. Those days are over. Now it's about mutual respect. It's about identifying the players, getting with them, showing them that you care about not only them as a football player, but you care about their personal life. So I think it's real important to find a leader. And, I look at a guy like Aaron Glenn, and, we mentioned Mike Vrabel. Those are former players. A lot of these coaching candidates never played the game. And I do wonder if that is a factor in the locker room when the coaches are not there, if they're taking responsibility from guys who did not play the game at that level. So for me, it is absolutely leadership. And for the sense of the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think that becomes even more problematic because, Gus, in my opinion, this team is desperately lacking leaders. I mean, you could say Foye Oluokun's a leader. You could say Josh Hines-Allen is a leader. Trevor Lawrence has showed more leadership growth in his 4 years, but, is he still a great leader? So I think this team, losing a guy like Calais Campbell really hurt him. They brought in Eric Armstead thinking he was going to be a leader. He wasn't. He didn't have a good year. So to me, without any question, finding a coach who is also a great leader and will show leadership 100% of the time is without question the number 1 trait.
For sure. That's a good point about the roster. It's a two-way street. The team definitely needs player leaders as well. But absolutely, you need a leader of men to come in here and kind of fix the franchise, rebuild the culture. And to do that, it definitely starts with relationships. You can't have a guy that's going to be a great motivator, just come in for great pregame and halftime speeches, and that's it. It starts with building relationships with players so that players really play for you. And then even when it comes down to just player development and or like calling plays for players, Trevor Lawrence isn't gonna develop into a better player and a better quarterback just because he gets a guy that's good at calling plays. He needs someone to build a relationship with so that that coach can really get the most out of him. And it's not just Trevor Lawrence, but the whole team. And so I had a similar thought as you. I had I instead of leader of men, I wrote relationship builder because I do think it starts with that. But we're on the same page there. But that was actually my number 2 trait. My number 1 trait is aggressive approach, which can really be boiled down to a lot of different aspects of the game. And it's really come after me thinking about Ryan Nielsen's season as head coach. I mentioned this on a show last week, but he was like, just did not live up to his promises at all when he was mentioning how his philosophy before the season is attack and aggressive. And he didn't even live up to the tape last year with Atlanta, where they were not super blitz happy, but near the middle of the league. And they ran press coverage more than any team in the league. And we barely saw any of that this year in Jacksonville. And so he was really had a conservative approach, but I think you really need to have an aggressive mentality, and the mentality that you're not trying to lose the game or trying to avoid losing the game, but you're really more so trying to go out and win the game. So whether it comes down to blitzing more or being aggressive on 4th down decisions, being aggressive in a bunch of different aspects of in-game decisions, but being aggressive in just a bunch of different aspects in general is my number 1, just because of the recency bias with how the Jaguars have looked recently. So my number 1 is have an aggressive coach in all aspects. My number 2 is relationship builder. What is the second trait that you're looking for, Rick, after leader?
My number 2 takes a little bit of what you said, but number 1, all the importance of being a leader and everything around the franchise. Number 2 for me is right on the field. It's the X's and the O's. It is your scheme. And, we watch a lot of football, and what is your offense? What is your defense? How are you going to be able to implement that? Do you stay true to it? You just mentioned Ryan Nielsen. We had this incredible thought of what we thought he was going to do, what he did a year ago in Atlanta, and then it was the exact opposite here. The excuse was a lot of injuries, but nonetheless, it feels like he kind of got away from his defensive scheme. The offensive scheme here, we've tried to guess forever what why it was so problematic. I know they scored a touchdown in their last game on the first drive, but I want to say they went, was it 21 straight games where their first possession, they could not score a touchdown. So you look at the 15 scripted plays offensively by Press Taylor, and it didn't work for Jacksonville as the game began. So I want a coach, and I think the Jaguar fans should want a coach who has a presentation of what the football team is going to do, regardless of down and distance, whether you get the ball at your own 25 or you have an incredible kick return, which is rare these days in pro football, and you get the ball on their side of the field. A real solid, consistent scheme that your quarterback can run offensively, and that defensively you can put into place as well. So I'm looking for a coach who's a good in-game football coach with a very solid scheme. This is really my only one that is away from everything that a head coach has to do. But in my opinion, man, you got to be a good game day play caller, and you got to hire the right guys to call those plays. So I'm going to say number 2, I'm going to say scheme.
Yeah, and I think in order to be a good game day play caller, you need to be able to adapt. That's my third one. And it's basically the same point that you're making, that they need to have a good scheme. But what I want to add on is just that even if you have a great scheme, you need to be able to A, adapt to your players, but then also B, adapt to kind of trends around the league. So Liam Cohen did a great job of doing the former example, where after Chris Godwin and Mike Evans were banged up, he immediately shifted the offense in Tampa Bay to feature K. Dotton. Doug Peterson, Press Taylor didn't do as good of a job featuring Brian Thomas as soon as players in Jacksonville were injured. Obviously, he became the focal point of the offense eventually, but there was kind of a long ramp-up process. And it's fair for them to do a ramp-up process for a 21-year-old rookie, but it still just took too long to happen. And then I think Joe Brady is a good example of adapting to a league-wide trend where he has Josh Allen who can make any throw that he asks, but they really built the offensive line and the running back room and are truly a run-first team, even if Josh Allen is still the focal point of the offense. And doing so because NFL defenses were playing so many safety structures that have two safeties up deep, and therefore is more likely to give up rushing yards. And so Doug Peterson, I think, tried to do that and tried to lean a little bit more on the run game to kind of adapt to modern NFL trends on the defensive side of the ball, as well as to help Trevor Lawrence, but they just weren't able to quite get it done. And so I think Joe Brady was able to get it done in Buffalo. And so either way, I think that, again, you need to adapt both on a week-to-week basis for how to maximize your players, but then also to attack your opponent's weaknesses. But then also in terms of a larger scheme, like it's great if you come in with an awesome scheme, but this scheme isn't going to work for the next decade plus because hopefully that's the Jaguars' next head coach will be around for a decade plus. You got to be able to adapt. So after scheme, Rick, what is your third trait that you're looking for?
Well, and if we had this conversation 5 years ago, I never would have said this, but this is, in my opinion, the changing world of coach to player. But today, you got to listen. I mean, you got to listen to these guys. That whole buddy thing, I think it comes into play. And again, I think this really favors former players who can identify what players are going through. If you're in a 2 or 3 game losing streak, do you change a little something up? Do you take a day off? I'd love to say you don't hit in practice, but those days are done as far as hitting. I think being able to go up to players and understand what they're going through in their lives personally, and being able to have conversations to them and not ask a question and then kind of look around and, but really eye contact, look at them and show them that, hey, man, I care about you and your wife and your young kid and things along those lines. So I think it's real important for great head coaches to be able to have that relationship with today's players, to look right at them, let them know that we're equals here and that you've got your personal issues. And if there's something going on, you need to come to me. Josh Hines Allen missed the last game of the year. There was a lot of comments. There was a lot of speculation. I never try to dive into anything that is personal. I have no idea why he missed that game, but you would think that, not a coach who was a lame duck like Doug Peterson, who lost the locker room, the next coach, that maybe it was the coach's idea to say, wow, there's an issue going on here. You're taking this game off. Go fix whatever personally is going on. And I don't know what it was, but I'm just using that as an example because it just happened, over a week ago. So this is really new for me, but I think it's the way of the league now. I'm going to say listening to your players.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one and goes in hand with what we were talking about earlier in terms of being a leader of men as well as a relationship builder. Definitely got to be able to listen. I feel like there's not a huge barrier, but there's the coaches and the players in the Jaguars organization, and it would be better if the next head coach was able to kind of separate that divide a little bit and have everyone just be equals, as you were saying, and just individuals under the same team umbrella. That's definitely a good one. That leads well into my fourth trait that I'm looking for, which is to build an identity. And then again, it's a little bit of recency bias after watching what just happened in Jacksonville, partly with Ryan Nielsen not living up to his attack and aggressive mantra, but really more so Doug Peterson really never having an identity. He was asked throughout the season and before the season, and I feel like he always gave a different answer. The only time he gave a consistent answer actually was saying that like wins define your team, wins and losses define your team, and so that is what your team is. And so he was allowing wins and losses to dictate what the team was rather than trying to establish clear messaging and have a clear culture. And there was a lot of different coach speak that players would kind of like recite back to media, like, oh, we got to take one game at a time and just try to go 1-0 this week was a very common one. But I just think that he needed a clearer message and a more consistent message. And so that's number 4 on my list, especially, again, after seeing what transpired in Jacksonville. What's number 4 for you, Rick?
I'm going to go with consistency, and this is both good and bad. Let's say you're at the Miller Electric Center, you have a real bad practice. You run gases after practice. Maybe that wasn't scheduled, but you say, listen, we had a bad day today, a lot of missed assignments, a lot of drop balls, a lot of false starts. I'm going to run you. The next day, consistency is you have a really good practice. You reward them. I don't know. You bring out an ice cream truck. You do something. Is so many different ways to identify as far as consistency, but also, you're in season and something happens. So let's say you let one get away and you lose a game you should have won. Then the following week you take it on a team that's clearly better than you and they beat you decisively. Are you going to all of a sudden show up on Monday and change your entire plan? You're going to change your practice structure. No. You got to remain consistent with these players. And even after some difficult times, I think that really, speaks volumes about where you are, again, as the leader of this team. You just don't want to break down and panic and say, oh my God, this thing is over because you've had a couple of rough outings. So I think consistency, player to coach, coach to player, more than player to coach, coach to player is a trait nowadays that, once again, I don't know if I would have said this much like listening to players 5 years ago. But I think as we continue to move forward, it becomes that much more important to have that type of consistent relationship, player to coach.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one. And only like championship caliber teams are the most consistent teams in the NFL typically. Just doing everything right, not just generating positive plays on offense and negative plays on defense at a consistent level, but just consistently not messing up even and not having penalties or just dumb drops or mistakes like that. And it even boils down to an individual level of just how consistent each player can be on a play-to-play basis. That'll really help make the team more consistent in general, obviously, but just make the team better as well. And that goes in hand with my last trait, which is attention to detail. And I think both of these things are more things that were missing from Jacksonville, not just in 2024, but in recent memory. I think it goes hand in hand with what we talk about in terms of being a good communicator, building relationships with guys. You got to be able to not just pay attention to details, but be able to communicate them well to your staff and to your players. So attention to detail, number 5 for me. Round it out for us, Rick. What's your number 5 coaching trait that you're looking for?
Attention to detail, by the way, I got to imagine all 32 NFL coaches would say that, and because it's so important to them. I mean, how many times did we hear Doug Peterson this year say we got to clean that up? I mean, he was still saying that in week 15, week 16. So that is certainly a good one. I'm going to go with loyalty here. And, I remember Doug Marrone. It didn't matter what the situation was. He would say it's on me. And it almost felt like it was fake loyalty. And I'm not saying that as a personal shot at Doug Marrone because I really like Doug, but I think it fell on deaf ears. No matter what the situation was, you dropped 3 balls today. That's on me. The players got arrested by going to a gentleman's club in London. That's on me. Everything was on Doug Marrone. I think too much of that becomes, it's not believable anymore. Doug Peterson, the way he handled the hit in the eventual concussion to Trevor Lawrence was terrible. It was just awful. As the coach of this team, where's the loyalty to your quarterback? I mean, look at what Houston did. Look at their coach. Look at their general manager. They were 100% in the wrong, yet they made it them against everyone else. And if you're a fan of the Houston Texans, I hate to say this, you got to be like, wow, I am so impressed with DeMeco Ryans. I am so impressed with this organization, knowing that they are wrong, yet they defended their player. Where around here, we didn't have that. I mean, how do you run through a brick wall when your coach doesn't have your back the way that he is supposed to? So it is such a long season for these guys, and it's such a grind. And you end up not liking each other when you're around each other in any competitive team athletics. And this mostly comes out in baseball in July and August, especially if you're losing. And you're losing like the Jaguars did this past year, going 4-13. If you don't have your players back and you're not loyal to them, that is how you are going to lose this locker room. So to me, I'm going to put number 5 in, as the coach has to show loyalty to his players.
Love it. Absolutely love it. That's a good one to end on, Rick. To recap, my top 5 was 1, aggressive approach; 2, relationship builder; 3, ability to adapt; 4, firm identity; and 5, attention to detail. Can you recap your top 5 for us, Rick?
Number 1, without question, is leadership. Number 2, I'm going on the field, and it's a scheme that you believe in and your players believe in. Number 3 is, nowadays you got to listen, not only professionally but personally. You got to know what's going on with your players. You got to understand that they have issues and problems like everyone does, and you got to identify them and talk to them about it. Number 4, consistency. Regardless if you're winning or losing, you just don't drop what you're doing and change it because you're in a panic mode. You got to be consistent with these players. And then number 5, you got to show them that regardless of the set of circumstances, that you have their back. Loyalty is number 5 as far as the trait or the traits that, in my opinion, make up what you're looking for as far as a head coach.
Awesome. My last question for you, Rick. After doing this exercise, did it change your mind about any of the head coach candidates for this cycle?
I've wanted Ben Johnson all along. Okay, and my thought on this is different from about everyone else. I want a head coach who calls plays, because the most important thing on this football team, in my opinion, is Trevor Lawrence. And I don't want to bring someone in, have a hot offensive coordinator, and all of a sudden the switch gets flipped and Jacksonville becomes a perennial playoff team this year, next year. Then all of a sudden you lose that offensive coach as a head coach, and you're going to bring in a totally new system again. So that has been my thought. But it's always going through my mind. And now I'm believing in Aaron Glenn, and a former player who, again, I think has the ability to really connect with these players and the traits that we went through. I think Aaron Glenn, out of the 10 candidates, 4 have already interviewed, Robert Sowell interviewed today, I think he sticks out as the one that may represent what this organization is looking for most. So did it change my opinion? No. But as the days move by, I think I'm accepting the fact that it's not going to work here with Ben Johnson. I don't think he's going to take the job for several reasons. Right now, I think it's Aaron Glenn, and I think he identifies the 5 reasons that I mentioned, and several reasons that you mentioned. How about you?
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I still think that Ben Johnson should be like the top choice in everyone's mind, including Jacksonville. But when we did top 5 coaching candidates on this show with Hayes last week, I had Cohen as my number 2, and then I think Braves, and then Glenn. And so I would swap Cohen and Glenn, at least for sure, and Glenn would be my number 2 as well. Because at least for your list, like if you oversimplify the coaches in terms of just the one word, like Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson are both scheme, which is number 2 for you, and Aaron Glenn is kind of this definition of leadership. And so I think I think the Lions coordinators are just, it took me a while to realize it, but I think those are the 2 best candidates in this coaching cycle. So if the Jaguars end up with either one of them, I think all of Duval County will have reason to celebrate. But Rick, unless you have any other parting thoughts, that'll do it for us on this episode. Appreciate you, Rick, for joining us. Hopefully we'll have you back again soon. But again, Rick hosts the Into the Night each weekday, 6 to 8 p.m. on 1010XL, so make sure to check that out. We'll be back on Thursday for another episode with Mia O'Brien. That'll be at 9:04 a.m. on Thursday. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Thanks again to Rick. Have a good one, everyone. Hopefully the weather will warm up soon.